will be evolving, what the future holds post-COVID in terms of Indian laws. So let's talk about how COVID has impacted the entire world. And, India has been hands-on with it. We've been going back to our colonial laws time and again, whether it's the Epidemic Diseases Act, or is it disaster management, or the state disaster management regulations, which have been there since the 1800s or the 1960s. So basically, India has been hands-on thanks to all those old colonial laws, but it is high time that there is a need that India needs to evolve or restructure its laws as soon as this COVID is over. We need to be prepared in terms of what the future will be like, how we are going to take care of it, considering that we've already been in lockdown for over a month, almost a month, and this may last even longer. God knows how long this is going to last. There is definitely a need for our laws and our country to restructure everything to make it easier, so that there's no difficulty in terms of running business operations, or in day-to-day life, or in terms of getting essential services. So let's start with what kind of implications this is going to have on healthcare sector, or the pharmaceutical sector. I mean, we can see right now we have our doctors and the pharmacists working 24/7, hands-on, trying to provide assistance and medical care in this COVID scenario during this pandemic. But definitely post COVID, this healthcare sector needs to be evolved a little more. Right now, our healthcare sector is, basically under the purview of Drugs and Cosmetics Act, or the medical devices rules, or the several licenses like your medical councils of India's license, or the other pharmacist council of India's licenses. But there's definitely a need for a public healthcare law. In fact, there was a bill that was introduced in 2005, which was your public healthcare bill of 2005. Definitely, if you look at the text of that bill today, I mean, it would make so much sense today in this scenario, that how it could foresee, that entire law could foresee such a situation where there's going to be a major epidemic or a pandemic, and how the government is going to control, how different authorities like the DMs would be ordered to ensure that a lockdown or a curfew like situation, or these essentials is done easily, how essential services are distributed easily, and basically how to control all of that. Right now, even though globally a lot of developed countries do have public healthcare laws, in fact, some countries like UK and Canada even have your national health services, where healthcare is provided free of cost. In India, however, we do not have such a situation, and which is why there is a need of a public healthcare law. So definitely post-COVID, it seems like India, the government is going to look at the National Public Healthcare Bill of 2005, probably work onto it, adapt some suggestions which were made in the bill, or probably pass such a bill, or pass a law basically on public healthcare, to ensure that in future, whenever we come across such an epidemic, we are in a position to take care of such a scenario. I mean, it is so sad to see today that even though our pharmacists and healthcare workers are working 24/7 to assist us, but they are being attacked, or they've been, the life has become so difficult for them. There have been a lot of crimes and offenses against them these days. And which is why the government has come down with several regulations, and there's an ordinance also in place where they've started passing out, where they're trying to protect the healthcare workers, the doctors, the nurses, the hospital staff, and the pharmacists. And under these regulations, under these laws, which have come into place temporarily today, they are looking at the offenders, and ensuring that there is a proper trial against those offenders, and there's proper basically penalties, or they're penalized basically, or in terms of assault or anything, they're arrested. But we need to be sure in future that in case tomorrow something similar happens, what is the government of India going to do? I mean, it's not possible for every government to just, work hands on with whatever we have. We need to be prepared henceforth, which is why post COVID, it seems that, these healthcare, the public healthcare laws, and some specific guidelines in terms of protection of healthcare workers, whether it's just for pandemic and epidemic situations or otherwise, because otherwise also our doctors and healthcare workers face a lot of turmoil with patients, with people. There are a lot of offenses and crimes even though against them, even though they're trying so hard to save us. So definitely in the healthcare sector there's going to be some change. We hope there's going to be some change. In terms of pharmaceuticals, when we talk about drugs and cosmetics, today a lot of drugs are restricted drugs, or certain drugs like hydrochloroquine that we were talking about was a controlled or a banned drug for some time. And when globally the demand has risen for such drug, India has lifted, even though there was an export ban, India has kind of, lifted that ban temporarily and started providing that kind of drug. So I think post COVID, in terms of drugs and cosmetics, there's going to be some amendment of that sort which talks about such controlled or banned drugs, which may provide some sort of assistance or relief in an epidemic or a pandemic situation. And how the laws are going to take place in respect of export of such banned or controlled drugs. Right now, we do not have a proper law into place as to how the export is going to take place. Right now, all this was done all of a sudden without a backing of a proper foundational law in place. Even though drugs and cosmetics just talks about what these drugs are going to be, how they're going to be manufactured, how they're going to be stored, what licenses needs to be taken, but there needs to be more clarity in terms of how they will be distributed in terms of an epidemic, how their trials and testing will take place in case turns out that this banned drug or a restricted drug can provide a solution or can be used as a vaccine to an epidemic situation, and how the export and the import of such drugs are going to take place. So definitely we see that there's going to be some change in drugs and cosmetics laws. And until very recently, your medical devices were actually not tested and they were not controlled. Basically, anybody could create a medical device, whether it was a thermometer or a BP machine. So, which is why there was a lot of problem, because you could get unscrupulous parts in the market. So you could just get a bad thermometer, or you could get a bad CT scan machine, or you could get a poor quality material which is used in surgeries, whether it's your plates and nuts and bolts which are used during surgeries. But there was an amendment in the year 2019, and from 1st January 2020, certain new devices were added to the medical devices list, including your thermometers, your BP monitors. And definitely we see that this regulation, your medical devices rules, needs to be amended further to ensure that all kinds of medical devices that we're using, whether they are surgical devices or something like something as basic as a thermometer or a stethoscope or a BP machine or a sugar testing diabetic patient, a sugar testing machine, definitely the government needs to include those on medical devices rules, so that a minimum quality standard is controlled. Because right now we see that people are facing difficulty in terms of they're not getting their testing done regularly. So a diabetic patient, until unless they have a sugar testing machine, a glucose testing machine at home, it is very difficult for them to go out right now and call a path laboratorist into their houses and just give a test sample, considering that everything, all resources are shifted towards testing for COVID positive patients. I see there is a chat flashing. I'm so sorry. Let me. Okay. So definitely, which is why we need that these medical devices which are available to us at home, whether it's your glucose testing machine, a BP machine, they need to have a minimum quality standard. And even the equipments which are used during surgeries, whether it's your knives and scalpels and nuts and bolts, they need to be of a particular standard and tests, because we don't want such a situation where, considering we are under a lockdown and we have got a poorly a very poor medical device fitted into our body, which is, causing more difficulty for a person. So definitely, again, under medical devices rules, we see that there's going to be some evolution in the law. There's going to be some restructuring. Currently, we read all over the news. The PM is making statements. The health ministry is making statements that they are looking into restructuring of laws. And right now, the entire focus is on COVID. But it is an assumption today that we are making that, considering that they are making so much effort during this COVID lockdown, that post COVID, there are definitely going to be a lot of restructuring of laws. And also, there's going to be a lot of business for lawyers. Like they say, a lawyer never loses his appeal. Definitely, there's going to be a lot of work, whether it's bankruptcy or divorces, or it's just going to be, force majeure contractual litigation. But definitely, there's going to be an increase in litigation as well. Now, coming to your FDI. Thanks to press note 3, currently there is a restriction in terms of FDI investment from neighboring countries. Basically, this press note 3, this change in the FDI policy was done to control any funding that was coming from China. The main focus was on China, although we covered all the neighboring countries. But considering we have already almost $8 billion invested into our country at this point in time directly, and we don't know how much is getting routed through Singapore and the other Southeast Asian countries, but 8 billion is what we are aware of. And we see that considering that there's going to be there could be a situation of where China has invested a lot of money and decides to take a hostile acquisition or a turn hostile takeover of an Indian company. So we don't want such a situation. We already have a lot of Oppos and Xiaomis in our country, and definitely that has affected the mobile and the telecom and the IT industry a little bit. But at this stage, since our PM has been talking about Make in India and is looking that tomorrow post-COVID, India must become one of the biggest manufacturing hub, considering all the countries want to shift their base from China post-COVID naturally, thanks to the epidemic that they have spread. So, definitely there's going to be some change in the FDI policy. Of course, I personally believe that this restriction from China is legitimate to an extent that we do not want that our Make in India campaign fails. We do not want a lot of Chinese investment into our country. We are looking for the Western investment. A lot of sectors, in fact, good 90% of sectors were approved by the laws of the country under the automatic route. So the RBI permits you that if you're an American company or any Western or any country for that matter, except the neighboring countries, if you decide to invest into a lot of almost 90% of the sectors, you can invest that money directly without any prior approval. But now, because of press note 3, if you have a base in one of the neighboring countries of India, or your profit is, or the control is in one of those neighboring countries, then in such sectors, the FDI will not come through automatic route, and that needs to be scrutinized by the RBI, and you need to take that government approval. So this, I believe, this FDI policy will stay in for place, and probably there are going to be some more stringent regulations in terms of all the Chinese investment that is coming, that is rerouted through other countries, considering a lot of Chinese investment is being rerouted through Singapore. So I believe RBI is going to definitely look into it, and that's why our FDI laws will evolve. And probably there's going to be some assistance to a lot of countries who will be shifting their manufacturing base from China to India. This is the best time for India to become a manufacturing hub. We hear day in, day out that, the leader of Japan has given a statement that they're providing funding to their manufacturers, to their local companies, that if they shift their base from China to back to Japan or to any other country, they're providing some sort of financial assistance. So I believe that probably this is the time, the iron is hot and we should definitely take a strike. India will definitely look into this in terms of FDI, that if countries like Japan, US, Europe decide to invest into India, they're going to definitely provide some sort of relief and make it easier. So it seems that, even though certain regulated there are some regulated sectors, they'll probably try and put a timeline and maybe try making it easier to get those approvals. And in terms of where automatic approval is given, uh, probably some sort of assistance, whether providing them a place in the SEZ zone or providing some sort of assistance to make business easier, that will be done. Considering that the government of India is already providing such sort of assistance to startups in India, I think it's time that we provide some sort of relief to all kinds of foreign industries that are moving their base from China to India, basically shifting their manufacturing base. So let's say tomorrow Apple decides to shift their entire factory from China to India. I think at that point in time, the Indian government should definitely make some changes to the FDI laws in place and make it easier, a smooth transition from China to India, and provide them some space to open up those factories and some sort of assistance how they're providing it to the startups, whether it is in terms of ease of getting loans and approvals, or ease of getting places on lease or buying out properties. So definitely, I mean, in that aspect, it seems that there's going to be some change. The FDI regulations are definitely going to evolve, although it seems that press note 3 will stay in place for some time. But there might be another press note soon, probably post COVID, where they will make lives easier for all the other countries and all the other manufacturing units who are shifting their base from China particularly to India. And talking about startups, I mean, the government of India is doing a fabulous job already supporting a lot of startups the way they are, whether it's in terms of funding or whether it's in terms of doing ease of business, or their day-to-day filings and MCA compliance and regulatory work. During COVID, in fact, the government of India has started providing assistance in terms of providing loans and funding to startups who are into providing manufacture or are into providing essential services, whether it's your surgical masks or N95 masks that we are using, or sanitizers. And they've set a ceiling limit of about 5 crore rupees of that support, of that funding support. So it seems that definitely, since startups have been getting some support from the government of India all this while, it seems post COVID, not only the startups who are into the essential services at this point who are getting those support, tomorrow that support may be increased to other e-commerce related startups who are assisting in terms of collaborating the need of essential service to the consumer. So although there's already a lot of ease of business given to startups, but in terms of funding, it seems that the government will make it somewhat more easier for anybody to start a startup in terms of getting funding or getting loans and making those approvals easier. And definitely, like I said, there's going to be some special assistance to anyone who's shifting the base from China to India. Any startup who is able to compete with a Chinese brand or a Chinese industry, definitely I think they will also get some sort of support under the Startup India scheme. So let's see how that all of that works out. But definitely, considering that the startup law is evolving almost every day, we see that there's going to be a major change in what we have in place today. So it seems like Make in India dream is going to be fulfilled very soon. It seems like that post-COVID India is going to turn out as a winner. That's what all the newspapers and news reports are saying at this point in time. But to be a winner, we have to evolve our laws. There needs to be a lot of restructuring, a lot of realignment, and let's see how that goes. Like I said, most of the countries will shift their manufacturing base from China to India. So definitely that is going to help in increasing our exports. And I think that's when the Indian government, in terms of their custom laws and in terms of exports, will make some change to make it easier to export goods. However, I personally believe that they're going to increase the import duty from China to a little more than what it is current. So I mean, already there is a lot of import restriction and high import duties when we are importing from China, but I see that number going up. So definitely there's going to be some change, so as to support the manufacturing sector. And greater export means more money into the country. So, like a lot of people say that India is going to definitely come out as a winner in this scenario. Now, talking about the competition or the manufacturers in place in country. So, we've already spoken about a lot of shift from China to India and how business is going to shift. So that's where we've spoken about the international market. But what about the domestic market, where we have players competing amongst themselves? Right now, the Competition Commission has provided sort of a temporary relief, or maybe a little bit of a relaxation, is that's what we may call. They are allowing the competitors in the market who are providing essential services to work together for creating efficiencies and providing consumer with better services. However, under the competition laws, such a scenario where competitors come together and work is kind of anti-competitive in the eyes of the law. So the Competition Commission says today, if you're providing support to the consumer and increasing efficiency, then for that period you are under that relaxation. You all competitors of essential services can work together. However, you need to follow the competition laws which are already in place. So I feel that post-COVID, CC has got to look into this very closely, considering that today all these essential service manufacturers or service providers may be working closely, maybe working together. Like sometimes you can see Swiggy and Kirana shops, or Zomato and Swiggy working out together to provide essential services. But tomorrow that may create a cartel-like situation, which is why post-COVID, there's got to be a stringent investigation, and probably the CCI will want to keep a closer eye into such kind of agreements and such kind of relation that the players have in the market, to see that even though today they were providing consumer benefit, tomorrow we don't want that entire benefit to just turn its face, turn around, and start creating inefficiencies in the market. So considering that Competition Act is already under a lot of change, and we already have an amendment bill into place, it seems that the CCI will want to keep a closer eye into these cartel-like situations, such agreements where tomorrow inefficiencies can be increased. Also, I think there's going to be an increase in number of joint ventures and M&As, considering we're going to get a lot of funding into the country. A lot of companies will be investing into India, and since it can be a little difficult situation or a scary situation for a first timer to enter into a new market like India, probably they are going to get into a JV or a M&A with some of the Indian party, which means there's got to be a major increase into joint ventures, which increases the work of the Competition Commission, considering that most of these JVs will probably reach the threshold which is under the purview of the Competition Commission. And to see that these joint ventures are creating efficiencies and not inefficiencies, and not foreclosing the market, or there's ample competition in the market, it seems that the Competition Commission's work is going to increase for some time now. And that means that under the Competition Act, where under the amendment bill right now, there is a recommendation that the membership of the Competition Commission is going to increase from what it is today, from the current 3 to 7, what it was earlier before the amendment that took place. So it seems like that, yes, there's going to be some restructuring into the Competition Commission, their membership, and in fact into their entire structure, so as to make it easier, considering that their work is going to increase a lot. So although the law is evolving, but the commission itself also needs to evolve. And probably in the near future, we see that there might be a judicial member who may also be appointed, if maybe not at the commission stage, but definitely at the appellate stage. A judicial member may be appointed, or a separate bench will come into place to decide the competition appeals. So that was from the competition law perspective. Now talking about the Epidemic Diseases Act and the National Disaster Management Plan. So we already have a 1987 law, which initially was made to control, to take care of 4 diseases at that point in time: malaria, cholera, dengue, and one more I'm forgetting, I'm sorry. So that is a 1987 act, and the National Disaster Management Plan came into place. There's a National Disaster Management Act of 2005, but there are very, very old laws that are already in place today. There are a number of state enactments which date back to 1800s. There are some which date back to 1960s. There's something like a Livestock Importation Act and the Indian Ports Act. So there's going to be a lot of amendment into this. Like I said initially in the beginning of this webinar, that we see that there's going to be some change or maybe some adaptation from the National Health Bill of 2009. I mean, definitely it seems that these laws will be amended in terms of the National Bill Health. I mean, talking about Livestock Importation Act, there's going to be immediately post-COVID lockdown. It seems that there's going to be some restriction in terms of importation of livestock, considering that they say that COVID-19, the virus evolved from bats. So, I mean, there's no clear data as to how much that has transferred through different species, considering from bat, it has definitely come into human beings, but we don't know whether it has transferred to other livestock as well or not. So since there's no data to support it, it seems that there's going to be some restriction on importation of livestock as well. And there's going to be some restriction on the Indian Ports Act as well. It seems post-COVID, they're going to be, just to be on a safe side, there are going to be some stringent regulations or some stringent control to ensure that we do not fall prey to COVID-19 all over again. Now, coming to our day-to-day litigation in terms of criminal offenses, we have already seen how many criminal offenses are taking place against medical staff or the doctors, the health workers, basically. And definitely those offenses has increased, and which is why now the government has temporarily come out with certain penal provisions as to how to take those actions against the offenders who are abusing or who are assaulting the healthcare workers. So I see definitely there's going to be some change in the criminal laws, probably some amendment in the IPC, because I feel at this point in time that it is expedient that the Indian government sees that abuse or assault against a medical support staff or a healthcare worker is never all right. I mean, not only during this pandemic but otherwise as well, which is why I think there should be a penal provision which is permanent in place under the IPC, which specifically talks about when there is an assault or some sort of criminal offense against the health workers. Thanks to COVID lockdown, it seems the number of divorces are rising. So, I mean, that's a good thing for divorce lawyers. However, a lot of domestic violence, abuses, and offenses are also taking place, which means that the courts will look into it very strictly. And although in terms of divorce, there will be some cooling off period, I think will be mandatorily provided in all these COVID-related, lockdown-related divorce petitions. But I think DV violations, the DV offenses will be taken very, very seriously, because when the entire country or the entire world is struggling with pandemic, if women of the house are also abused, when there are cases where there is a lot of violence against them, I think that should not be tolerated, and probably the courts will look into it very strictly. Although I don't see that there's going to be any major effect on the DV law in terms of COVID. So, however, the litigation, like I said, is definitely going to increase. So there's going to be a lot of DV related litigation in the increase. Okay, now talking about now MCA and the regulatory compliances. Right now, MCA has relaxed a lot of rules and regulations, where it has relaxed the board meetings. It has allowed the companies that there will be no late fee on filings till June 2020. So I mean, they've given up that time because they understand the businesses are affected during this lockdown, and in fact they are considering all the expenses or the donations made towards COVID-19 as a CSR expenditure. But definitely, it seems that the MCA, considering if the lockdown extends, is going to allow a lot of relaxations again. But these relaxations will be temporary. So it seems that probably a Ministry of Corporate Affairs is going to come out with some regulation, maybe permanently in place, where they sorry, where they're going to talk about what happens in such scenario for curfew, or such a circumstances where there is an epidemic and the businesses are affected. So in terms of MC and the regulatory filings, there is some relief right now, but we don't know how long that relief is going to stay in place. So all we can do is we can hope that businesses will bounce back definitely post COVID, once normalcy is restored. But I believe that MCA should probably increase that relaxation for some more time, considering that businesses will take some time to bounce back. Also, in terms of tax filings, we know that the time period for tax filings is increased till June 2020. And in terms of GST, also there is a lot of benefit that is provided today, but I don't seem that that is going to last for long, considering that today they're just providing relief to any GST filer or any company that needs to file a GST, whose turnover is less than 50 million. They're not charging any interest, late fee, or a penalty. But where it crosses 50 million rupees, there is an interest to a reduced rate of 9%. That again puts a lot of responsibility, onus, and expenditure on a company, considering that right now during lockdown a lot of businesses are affected. In fact, the companies that are into essential services also working with 50% manpower, which makes it difficult, considering that even though when they're manufacturing their products, their capacity is only till 50%. So I mean, even though they're getting a tax benefit today, they're getting that GST relaxation or an income tax relaxation today, that doesn't seem to last post COVID. So post COVID, again, GST is going to make a little difficulty for businesses in India in terms of filings, because immediately post lockdown, once this benefit is not once this benefit is lifted, it's going to start creating problems. And coming to the most important part of how COVID is going to affect contracts, there's going to be a number of litigation, whether in terms of contractual disputes or termination of employees on force majeure grounds, termination of lease, rent agreements, or just liquidations. There's going to be an increase in number of litigations in terms of these sectors, considering that force majeure, although is not a part of a skeletal structure of contract law in India, but that is kind of imbibed from the act. But there needs to be more clarification in terms of what the scope of force majeure is going to be. So probably there's got to be some amendment either in the Indian Contracts Act, or probably some clarification from the Supreme Court should come soon as to how force majeure will be looked into in each of these scenarios, because there is no clarity as of today. There's a lot of conflicting views. Certain states allow that lease may be terminated on grounds of force majeure during this lockdown, but certain states do not provide that kind of exemption. And similarly, this is causing a lot of difficulty, whether it's for employers, employees, lessors, lessees, or any other contractual issues. And considering that, if I mean, they can't look at all these agreements at par, considering that there are a lot of government contracts also in place. So if those contracts are terminated on force majeure grounds, then how will those government contracts work? So I mean, will it be beneficial for the government, or will it be beneficial for the other party, and the government's going to suffer? So that means losing out on a lot of Indian government's money. So definitely I feel that there's going to be some change, some evolution of the force majeure clause at least, or the concept of force majeure in India. I mean, it's high time we need to evolve the understanding of force majeure for the timing. For the timing, we are just working our way through it, and but definitely there needs to be more clarity, whether it's through evolution or reading down the provision by the Supreme Court, or whether there needs to be an amendment in the Act of the Indian Contract Act, or some other regulation which clarifies how force majeure clauses are going to work. And the most important point that I would like to talk about here is the implication that COVID is going to have post lockdown on personal sensitive data and IT laws. Considering that now we are doing a lot of business online, we are conducting this webinar also online instead of having a personal session. People are working from home, they're shopping online, e-commerce essential services are being provided online. Since we are now hooked onto using digital services, it seems that now it is high time that the law in terms of information technology is evolved, whether it's usage of their personal sensitive data, or looking at a closer look at the conduct of e-commerce, or just your IT regulations in terms of how data needs to be stored and how it can be used. Although we do have a law in place, there are regulations for personal sensitive data, but they're not sufficient. But post COVID, considering the world has already shifted to a digital form, even the courts are hearing matters virtually, there needs to be a stricter law into place, considering that a lot of confidential information is being discussed or is being shared over the digital platform. So I see that there's going to be a major shift from what we have today, and there's going to be a major evolution of the IT laws and the privacy laws. I mean, we have been talking about privacy laws for a very long time in this country, but it seems that it's not a distant dream anymore. There's going to be a substantive law in place, at least for privacy, and a more evolved information technology law. I think that's how COVID is going to affect all the laws in the country. And this is how I see that things are going to evolve. There's going to be a lot of restructuring, a lot of replanning, amendments. So it seems that the work is going to increase for the government, for litigators, for lawyers like us. And let's see how things work out, and how India turns out to be a winner, like they say. Hello.
Yeah, Khyati, you are
yes.
audible.
Yeah. Okay. I
you
thought
are
I lost you.
This?
Yes, I can hear you now. So I believe if anyone has some questions, I can talk about it. I think Advocate Sankrito has asked the impact on real estate sector. There's definitely going to be a major impact on real estate sector, considering no one has money today. So real estate will actually, that sector will subside. That means increase in litigation for real estate companies. People will want to, all the people who'd invested money and were looking for possession and who were supposed to get possession all this while, they will want to sue, even though they knew that this was a special scenario and the builders could not provide possession all this while. Even though that relief may be given to the builders for this period of lockdown, but overall real estate litigation is going to increase. And also litigation, like I said, in terms of lease and rent agreements, that is also going to increase, definitely because of force majeure, because there needs to be a clarity on force majeure. But like we see, real estate sector is going through downfall right now, but that's the scenario globally and not just for India. So anybody?
Is there any other question? Press note 3 on FDI. I think again Sangrito has asked one more question, Khyati.
Press note 3 on FDI doesn't talk at all on beneficial ownership, considering rights from shareholders from Singapore. Okay, right. Like I said, right now, Press Note 3 doesn't talk about how that money is getting rerouted through Singapore, Hong Kong, and the other countries, Southeast Asian countries. But I believe that, the government is already aware about it. All of us have already been voicing about it on all kinds of platforms. The government is already aware. And like I said, they're hands down on controlling COVID right now. But as soon as the lockdown is over and they start working on evolution of laws, definitely there's going to be a closer look at all the funding that is getting rerouted through Singapore, Hong Kong, and the other Southeast Asian countries, including Mauritius. Even though, with Mauritius, we have a very comfortable funding route, but definitely there's going to be some closer look, considering that we do not want a lot of Chinese money, whether directly or indirectly, coming into the country, and there's hostile takeover of the Indian industry. After all, the intention is to keep Make in India an Indian concept only, and not have a lot of foreigners coming into Make in India and just keeping Make in India a shell, whereas foreigners are actually working inside. So although we are allowing a lot of FDI, there will be some stringent regulations or maybe a closer look towards such investment. Advocate Nisha has asked, is government giving any relief on insolvency of companies? Right now, no relief is being given. I believe you are asking insolvency because of the COVID or COVID lockdown. Right now, I believe there isn't any relief that is being provided, but post lockdown, definitely the government is going to, yeah, I believe, yeah, due to COVID. So definitely there is going to be a statement sometime very, very soon where, or probably, there's going to be some precedent that they're going to set where insolvency or liquidation is due to COVID. They're going to provide some sort of relief. I mean, not just blindly take those companies into litigation, because this is a global pandemic. Everyone's facing difficulty in terms of business. Nobody has money. They have to end up paying their salaries, and when that difficulty is being caused, definitely some relaxation will be given. I think probably 3 to 6 months will be given to them before they can bounce back. Otherwise they will go into liquidation, maybe some sort of a scenario in those terms. We already, in fact, we have filed, we have a matter which is pending before the Delhi High Court on similar grounds currently, where the employees of the company have not been paid. But let's see, how that gets decided and how they take it forward. So right now there's no clarification on that, but definitely I see that law evolving. There's going to be some clarity and some relaxation to the companies before they go into liquidation due to COVID.
Thank you so much, Khyati. I think you have made it very clear. Though you have taken that point very rightly, Khyati, that yes, this question is to be taken that where the employees are not being given the money. But I think Secretary is also raising the same question. Even I was supposed to take that even though this pandemic has been made operational, but it is not been applied in its real stricto sensu, because government has related to the private parties to decide it amongst themselves. So it has not been made as a rule. So there is a lot of confusion and chaos with regard to layoffs, with retrenchment.
Which is why I said, post COVID, we believe that there's going to be a lot of clarification either through courts or through the government regulations or the laws. The parliament is probably going to, bring out a new law. But we see that it takes a lot of time for bills to form into a law. We don't know how long that's going to take. Probably till then we'll have to rely on how the courts decide in such a scenario. But right now, because of COVID, the entire attention is shifted towards, keeping people safe and keeping everyone in the lockdown and making sure that everyone abides with the lockdown. I think, right now, that's why this is the cause of the confusion. And all we can do is, just file writs, get it listed before the courts in urgent category. Otherwise, just sit back and relax and wait till things, turn out.
So what do you really think, whether this period should be considered as a layoff as per the Industrial Dispute Act or not?
Well, I think this will depend upon what the condition of, my personal understanding is that, we should look it into a case-to-case basis, considering where layoffs were made even before, because the health of the company was not in a good situation, or, even before COVID lockdown, because there are a lot of layoffs which have taken place during COVID lockdown, but the real reason was not COVID. In that case, they will be looked into according to provisions of industrial dispute. But wherever layoffs or retrenchment, basically layoff has been done due to COVID, then definitely some relaxation should be given to the industries, considering what their health is. If they're in good health, definitely they should pay the some sort of compensation to the employees, pay off. Otherwise, if they're not in good health, then putting that kind of liability on a business at this point in stage would be harmful to the economy of the country. So let's see how the courts decide, but that's just me. Let's see how the courts and the government evolves this.
Yeah. So that way, is definitely the lawyers are going to have fetch more work, right? Post COVID. That's what you have been repeating again and again.
Right. So like I said, lawyer never loses their appeal. So, I mean, definitely there's going to be huge increase in number of litigation and a lot of business coming for lawyers. I mean, I was doing some other webinars the other day, and this question was raised time and again, whether we feel that there's going to be a lot of NCLT insolvency litigation for lawyers or not, because some young lawyers are fearing that probably there's going to be a decrease in work. But trust me, people who have the patience to fight a litigation in court have enough to pay you your fee. So don't worry. there's going to be increase in litigation, so lawyers are not going hungry. You're definitely getting your fair of litigation, and like I said, there's going to be increase in litigation. Let's see how that gets distributed amongst all of us.
Thank you so much, Khyati. And we wish you all the best for the matter being posted in the Delhi High Court. We all will wait for the outcome of the same, as that would settling the many questions of the viewers. And thank you so much for today's session, Khyati. Once again, on behalf of us and clarifying this post-COVID position, there has been so much chaos in the society with regard to this. We are so much thankful to you, Khyati.
Thank you so much, Nitesh sir, and everybody for being all ears and giving me the opportunity. And it was just so lovely to be here and talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.